Storms. My name is Kaylin and welcome back to my channel Thriving in Fiction. And today, in honor of Father's Day, I thought I would go over some of my favorite father/mentor figures in fiction. So a little bit of a disclaimer before we get right into the list. This obviously isn't a comprehensive list of all of my favorite father or mentor figures in fiction. These are just the ones that I could name off the top of my head before I sat down to film this video. So in order to make it on this list, they had to have extensive interaction or extensive backstory and influence on the children or mentorees in their lives and in the story. That's how I kind of judged if they made it on this list or not. And I have 8 characters to talk about and then 2 at the end that are kind of morally gray or they stand out for a different kind of reason. So let's just get right into the list. So the first 2 I want to talk about are actually from the same series, and that is Lirin from the Stormlight Archive as well as Dalinar from the Stormlight Archive. So let's start with Lirin. So Lirin is Kaladin's father, and he is by no means a perfect character or a perfect father figure for Kaladin. They have a lot of friction in their relationship. They have a lot of judgment in their relationship. However, everything that Lirin does, he does from a place of love and wanting the absolute best for his sons and his family. And his influence on Kaladin is felt throughout his entire arc. A lot of the conflict that Kaladin faces stems from what he feels is judgment or not aligning with how his father sees the world. So Lirin is the town surgeon in the village that Kaladin grows up, and Kaladin is trained to be a surgeon in Lirin's footsteps. He is trained to take over the family business. The family is saving and hoping to send Kaladin away to receive an even more extensive medical training so he can be even better than his father. Lirin takes a lot of time to instill in him the practice of doing good and not harming, and because the medical field isn't, and what they do isn't fully understood, a lot of the people who live in the town look at Kaladin's family and they're almost scared of them. They feel like they don't understand what they do, so they feel like they practice a little bit of magic. They don't fully accept them. They're not a fully part of the village. But Lirin instills in Kaladin the importance of not judging the people for their ignorance and doing everything they can to help and not harming anyone and not drawing blood and not participating in war. That is a really big aspect of Lirin's character, and he tries very hard to instill in Kaladin this same value, this same moral integrity. However, Kaladin is roped into going off to war and becoming a soldier, and he almost fulfills the exact opposite of everything Lirin has taught him throughout his life. The conflict that these 2 characters have because of that, and so because of this instills a very conflicted morality within Kaladin himself, because he feels like he is doing good and he needs to fight and be a soldier. However, he has this gigantic shadow that is Lirin's presence in his childhood and his line of thinking, telling him that he is doing wrong by drawing blood and by fighting. So throughout Kaladin's backstory, you see this conflict between the 2 of them develop, and then in the 4th book that came out last year, Rhythm of War, you really see this conflict come to a head. I loved watching their relationship grow and develop, and Lirin having to reconcile the fact that his young son, whom he taught so much, is now a full-grown man and is making his own decisions, and even if they don't agree, especially on these big moral questions, it doesn't mean they can't still love one another and support one another. And I feel like both these characters had to learn a lot to come to that point in Rhythm of War, and it was one of the most satisfying father-son arcs that I've witnessed so far in reading. And the other character from the Stormlight Archive that I want to talk about quickly, because this book is getting very heavy and I want to put it down, is Dalinar. So Dalinar is the father of Adolin and Renarin, and he is a point of view character. We do see his point of view as we're going throughout the story. We see his backstory and his relationship with their mother. And I found it very interesting to see Dalinar's relationship with his sons where he is now. He listens to them, he puts a lot of weight in, especially what Adolin says in his opinion. He takes their opinions into account when he's making decisions. However, he's not fully swayed by what they think, but he does listen to them. And I found that a very refreshing take on a military leader, especially given his backstory. And ultimately, with his backstory coming to light in Rhythm of War, I'm very interested to see where Dalinar's relationships with his sons end up in the 5th book of the Stormlight Archive, which is the final book in the first 5-book arc. So to see especially Dalinar and Adolin grow from, they were very close in The Way of Kings, and to see where the story has them in Rhythm of War, I'm so interested to see where they end up. As Dalinar's arc has taken him further into leadership, it's left very little room for him to grow with his sons, and his relationships with his sons have definitely suffered because of that, especially the things that come to light throughout the narrative. However, I'm sure it will come back around in the 5th book, so I'm really looking forward to that one. And the next character on my list that I'd like to talk about is Clay from The Kings of the Wild. So in this book, you're following a merry band of mischiefs. They are a former band of mercenaries that were the biggest thing in their day, but they're now in middle age. They've settled down. They're retired mercenaries. Clay has settled down in a small town and has a wife and a little daughter. And he's visited one day by one of his ex-bandmates, and his ex-bandmate's daughter is in trouble, so he asks Clay for help in saving her. The sweet relationship between Clay, this big, tough ex-mercenary, and the relationship he has with his daughter is so sweet to see, and it's actually his daughter and her innocence that convinces him to go on this adventure that Clay then goes on in this book. It's almost the entire narrative is based on these broken men and what they would do for the love of their daughters. Because initially Clay says no to helping his ex-bandmate, but it's his daughter who asks, or who says, you know, if it were me, I know you would come help and protect me, Daddy. So her innocence and her belief in her father is actually what sets him on this adventure. As you're following Clay through this narrative, he is constantly having thoughts and thinking about and remembering and missing his family. And it also fits this really cute trope of this big tough dude with this mushy center that I love. So I highly recommend if you're looking for just a very fun adventure with a father who is very much missing his daughter. So Clay from The Kings of the Wild. And the next two I want to talk about are actually from the same book, and that is Arthur and Lioness from The House in the Cerulean Sea by T.J. Klugh. And this is just the most heartwarming, cozy hug of a book. Through this, you're following Linus, who is a social worker for magical children, and he is sent to an isolated orphanage where these almost tough magical children, these tough cases, are isolated in this orphanage, and he is sent there to assess one particular case. And when he gets there, he just falls instantly in love with these children, these characters. And you're shown Arthur, who is the head of the orphanage, and he's their father. He does everything he can to help these children. He loves these children. He nurtures these children. He is so gentle and kind, tough when he needs to be, and you're following Linus as you slowly start to see Linus become a father and a mentor role within these children's lives, and it is just so sweet and so heartwarming. So these adoptive fathers are probably some of the most heartwarming I've ever seen in a fantasy story ever. And this next one is a really recent popular read of mine, so I finally understand why everyone is in love with this character, and that is Gandalf from The Hobbit. So right now I think I have 100 pages left of The Fellowship of the Ring, and last month I read The Hobbit. I love Gandalf and his relationship with the hobbits. It is very fatherly and mentory. He is the catalyst in Bilbo's adventure. He is the one that says, you sir need an adventure. It will do you some good. And I absolutely love that about him. He has such a love and respect for the hobbits when anyone else in the world that is Gandalf's caliber overlooks them and doesn't think much of them. And he loves them for their simplicity, for their warmth, for their wholesomeness. The hobbits are so wholesome. And I just loved watching Gandalf slowly push Bilbo out of his comfort zone. He just loved watching him grow, and I loved watching him watch him grow. I just loved watching his relationship with Bilbo. And now in The Fellowship of the Ring, I love watching him with the hobbits. He loves them for their simplicity, their wholesomeness, their contentedness with good food and good company, and I love Gandalf. His relationship with Bilbo is what I love the most about The Hobbit, I think. And the next father figure that I really want to talk to you guys about today is Mr. Bennet from Pride and Prejudice. This is one of my favorite classic tales I've ever read, and as much as I love Elizabeth and Mr. Darcy and all the side characters, I loved seeing Mr. Bennet's relationship with Lizzie. He's kind of the one character in her family that shares her wit and her sense of humor. He just loves her so much. He loves all of his children so much. He's willing to put Lizzie's happiness above the security and the future of his family, which is kind of ballsy, especially for the time, and very different for the time, but you love him all the more for it. But at the same time, he's also not perfect. He doesn't understand the danger that Lydia's character puts the family in. He doesn't understand when Darcy and Lizzie are kind of having their differences. He does say it's your family, like your family is inappropriate, and he says even on the part of your father sometimes. So Mr. Bennet can be inappropriate at a time where inappropriateness can make or break a family. He doesn't understand all of his daughters in the same way that he understands Lizzie. He's not without his flaws. However, he loves his family. He's so willing to fight for the happiness of Lizzie, and it's beautiful to see, and I really enjoy that, especially in a work that is from a time where happiness was not a priority. Security was, especially in the life of a woman. And the next character I want to talk about is mostly from a TV show, but a little bit from the comics, and that is Giles from Buffy the Vampire Slayer. And I'm not going to hold this up. This is heavy. Buffy the Vampire Slayer. I feel like we all know what it is at this point. I'm going to put it down now. Okay, bye. Giles is not just a father or mentor figure for Buffy. He is the rock of the Scooby Gang, especially in the early seasons of the TV show. He is the wisdom, he is the researcher, he is the rock that keeps the Scooby Gang together and focused, especially in the early seasons with those characters being so young. And you get to see them slowly become closer. He slowly becomes willing to fight and die and kill for these kids that you know he loves. He holds them accountable. He's tough on them, especially Buffy. He is very tough on Buffy, but you know it's because he loves them and he wants them to survive the tough experiences that they're going through. So I thought he was a really well-written mentor father figure, and I also really appreciated when they decided to write him out of the series because his place in the narrative was filled. Buffy was a very established, independent character at that point. She no longer needed him, even though she was very sad to see him go. We all were sad to see him go, but it made sense with the narrative because he was such a good father figure and helped her develop and grow so much that she no longer had need of him. And I really appreciated that the writers recognized that and wrote him out before he became a stagnant fixture of the series. So those 8 characters were my more wholesome fatherly figure picks. Now I have 2 kind of honorable mentions or morally gray father figures that I still love to read about. However, I would not want them as my fatherly figure. And the first one I want to talk about is Wednesday from American Gods. I loved reading about Wednesday. He was infinitely entertaining and just fucking diabolical. I loved watching him rope Shadow into his quiet little schemes. I loved watching him manipulate the people around him. You could tell it came from years of experience, and Shadow was just along for the ride. However, he's definitely morally gray, to say the least. I appreciated watching his and Shadow's relationship grow throughout the novel, and you definitely get to see why so many of the other gods almost venerate Wednesday and why they look up to him so much. And the last one I want to talk about is a very recent find of mine, and that is Omni-Man from Invincible. This is heavy, but I'm only 2 issues into the actual comic book, so what I have to say has more to do, obviously, with the TV show. If for no other reason, watch Invincible for the relationship and the development between Omni-Man and Mark, between Nolan and his son Mark. It's definitely the linchpin in which the entire first season hinges upon. That family dynamic, and I can't say too much without getting into spoilers, but if you're looking for an interesting, morally questionable, highly central father-son relationship to the narrative, please watch Invincible. And I will let you know if the comic books are worth a read once I get more into it, but it is just so interesting and not something I've seen done, especially in a comic book or a comic book adapted story. Alright guys, so that has been my favorite father/mentor figures in fiction. Let me know if I missed anything in the comments below. If you are a father, happy Father's Day. If today's not your thing, just have a happy Sunday. And I'll see you in my next one, guys. Bye.